Hey everybody, Matt Church here, and welcome to another episode of Observer Effect. This one's going to be a bit long, which is ironic because I'm talking a little bit about this idea of information overload and how you get on top of it. So I'm Matt Church, and welcome to Observer Effect. It is the morning after Friday the 13th, 2020, March 2020, and coronavirus or COVID-19 has gone insane across the planet. And I want to talk a little bit to that, but I was planning on this third Observer Effect to do a little bit of a piece for academics and experts on how to present somewhat boring information in a way that's more engaging, which is our focus. But I'm also going to place it in the context of COVID-19 and use just a few of those examples. So let's jump into it. Let's watch, as always, the links are in the show notes, and my wish is that you would watch all of the videos in their entirety, not just the curated, edited versions that I'm doing here. All right, so let's jump straight into it. One of the best examples of data representation from academics is when they use props to make things come alive. This is Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's on The Late Show, probably one of the last ones that had an audience before this world changed. And he's talking a little bit about some, astrophysical events because he's an astrophysicist and not an epidemiologist. And here's a good piece to that effect. I love this because it sets the context for why you as an academic or as a researcher or anybody with evidence needs to become really inspiring at your presentation. This is the fundamental issue behind this episode.
Before I met you. Okay, Neil. Spoiler alert, you're a scientist.
Indeed.
And legally, I am required to ask you your thoughts about the coronavirus.
Oh.
And I understand you're not a virologist, you're not an immunologist, you're not an epidemiologist, but I suspect...
I'm an astrophysicist, Jim!
I suspect you have an opinion.
A point of view, I would say. So, I'm broadly scientifically literate, but what I will say of this virus, I think we're in the middle of a massive experiment worldwide.
And where's the guinea pigs?
Maybe. The experiment is...
This is it.
Will people listen to scientists? In this case, referring to medical professionals? In this particular case?
Say Anthony Fauci over allergy and infectious disease.
For example.
And so this is the point. Right now, we have this mass hysteria going on, and the people who actually have the information we need may not have the skills to present it. And notoriously, the CFO, who's got the numbers on what the business is doing, is given the worst time slot and the least support. And they're sometimes not qualified to tell the story that their data should bring alive. And that's at the heart of this issue. If you are going to use evidence and data and graphs, your job as a presenter is to bring them to life. This episode was great because of Neil deGrasse Tyson's use of props. I just want to jump, if I can, through to explain his damn tie. It's so awesome. And it's at about the 8-minute mark if you're jumping ahead yourself, and around about here.
How come it wasn't in 1960? 1965?
He's talking about Earth Day.
I have a feeling you're about to tell me.
Yes. We were actively going to and walking on the moon by 1970. With this spacecraft.
Props.
Saturn V. So sorry, all of us didn't make it to the moon. Just a little upper part here with the astronauts.
Right.
So that's cool.
Because you need that much fuel to pull that off.
Sure.
So then, we go to the moon to explore the moon. And we turn around. And we discover Earth for the first time. And
its entirety.
In its entire Earth.
Awesome, right?
Yes.
Earth.
Bring visual aids. Thank you very much.
I'm just saying, Earth. And there it was, just alone in the vacuum dark of space. And you see it not as...
Okay, so my point I wanted to make there was the use of props is extraordinary. Let's jump to Harvard anatomist, neuroanatomist Jill Bolte Taylor, talking about the time she had a stroke and the left and right hemisphere of her brain disconnected, so the corpus callosum probably wasn't working or something, and you get to watch her whole TED Talk. This is Jill Bolte Taylor using props and explaining things beautifully. So she's talking about how she felt connected to the universe, this sense of unity consciousness, which is a really cool idea. And obviously here she is with a brain, an actual brain on stage.
They care about different things, and dare I say, they have very different personalities. Excuse me. Thank you. It's been a joy.
She didn't need to bring her brain out. She could have put it on a slide.
Our right human hemisphere is all about this present moment. It's all about right here, right now. Our right hemisphere, it thinks in...
Okay, so if you look at her hands, she's painting a picture of the ethereal kind of emotional, abstract quality of the right hemisphere brain. Her whole body is a prop, and it is an embodiment of the information she's trying to present, which could be, and I would suggest 99.9999999% of the time, that an academic is talking about the structure of the left and right hemispheres. They're doing it this way. Now, if you are deeply into lecture 20 of a medical degree, year 7 on neuroanatomy as a specialist, sure, do what you want. But if you're trying to engage everybody to the information about what's going on, including an epidemic or a pandemic, then you need to realize that people are going to tune in to the ignorant, noisy voices and not the ones who have got the answers. Because the truth or the data, if you can't bring it to life, it doesn't get heard. And it's because you're heavily invested in your knowledge, you're so advanced that you don't think it needs the preamble. Everything, every message needs framing all the time. And academics who are presenting research, I want you to see the power of props, and I want you to also see the power of becoming or embodying what you're talking about. Let's watch Jill for a little bit further, and then we'll go to Dr. Hans Rosling.
Pictures, and it learns kinesthetically through the movement of our bodies. Information in the form of energy streams in simultaneously through all of our sensory systems, and then it explodes into this enormous collage of what this present moment looks like, what this present moment smells like and tastes like, what it feels like, and what it sounds like. I am an energy being connected to the energy all around me through...
Unafraid to use her body as a prop. If you refer back to the storytelling episode where we had former Vice President Al Gore, you'll see his use of embodiment in telling stories is critically important. The live experience demands more of you than standing behind the lectern reading out things that we could already read ourselves. It's live. Bring it to life. And it's the same with your data. Okay, so this is extraordinary stuff, and I think she does a great job of it. But without a moment or a hesitation, my favorite, and many people in the world agree, Dr. Hans Rosling from the Karolinska Institute that gives out the Global Prize on Medicine would give you a masterclass in bringing data to life. To be fair, he's selling a piece of software that does just that and demonstrating it, but doing so absolutely beautifully. Let's watch that a little bit just to make this point.
About 10 years ago, I took on the task to teach global development to Swedish undergraduate students. That was after having spent about 20 years together with African institutions studying hunger in Africa. So I was sort of expected to know a little about the world. And I started in our medical...
One of the points I love about Dr. Rosling is he establishes credibility, he's self-deprecating in doing so, and you'll see a joke that does that in just a minute. And by being humorous and self-deprecating, he's being less of the hubris that you often find in the professorial types who are publishing and releasing academic papers. A lot of people will say, who are presenting really important information, I am too serious or important, or this message is too serious or important for me to be dancing around like a monkey boy. And I go, I understand. But if it is that important, you need people to listen, and your ability to present or represent that data is going to do that really, really well. Let's watch Hans just a little bit further along as he starts to present some of the data.
The population, and on this axis here, I put fertility rate. Because my students, what they said when they looked upon the world, and I asked them, what do you really think about the world? Huh? Well, I first discovered that the textbook was Tintin mainly. And they said the world is still...
I expected that joke to get a better laugh than it did, but it could just be that the audience wasn't mic'd. What Dr. Rosling's doing here is he's got an XY graph up and he is establishing the horizontal axes and the vertical axes in narrative and story. And if you're going to present your data, you need to do this. You need to help us see what you innately and naturally see that we don't. Because when you establish these axes and you set it up so people deeply understand it, then the data that you see comes alive for them. Is that cool? So set up your X and your Y. If it's a Venn diagram, with your body in the air, help us understand it. There's a lot of rules of public speaking that say do not stand in front of your projected image. But that rule's silly. And here's an example. Dr. Rosling completely breaks that rule and smashes it.
So this is what... Now what has happened since it was industrialized countries and they had small families and long lives. And these were the developing countries. They had large families and they had relatively short lives. Now what has happened since 1962? We want to see the change of the
And what you want to do with data is you want to reveal the information sequentially. You don't want it to be like dumped and people then able to interpret it. If you're as old as me, you'll remember that music came on cassette tapes and you know the relationship between a pencil and a cassette tape, right? So if you were of that era, we went to school in the 80s and graduated to Purple Rain, had a Flock of Seagulls haircut. In that era, they used a thing called an overhead transparency. And if we were sitting together right now and I said, what was the key to the overhead transparency? And everyone goes, it's the reveal. It was the bit of paper that you would put on top of it. Now, for those who have no idea what I'm talking about, you just have to trust my word for it. So it's about don't dump all the information at once and don't present information unless the audience already is trying to figure out what happened. Your job is not to have the answer and then inform us. Your job is to make us care about the answers and the patterns that are represented on your slides. An example of a blogger who talks to this beautifully. It's in Forbes, and he says, as if he can find it. And this is a lady called Naomi Robbins, and 2 years ago she was a regular contributor to Forbes magazine. But she's an expert on bringing data analysis to life, and she's probably worth following if this is something you're interested in. I'll put the Forbes link up. And she's talking about graphs on multiple slides. Now, generally, as a rule, you want to reveal one graph per slide. And what she's saying towards the end of this presentation or this blog is that us trying to recall what the previous slide said requires too much of our short-term memory. And so she's talking about how you should build it and even use this little red line here to kind of indicate or help it pop out. Check out Naomi Robbins' work. Start following her if you've got to present a lot of data. It is her area of expertise and something really worth following. Someone who I think does an extraordinary job of this is Tim Urban. Now, Tim Urban is a blogger with a relationship to Elon Musk, and he's talking about here it's 2020 and you're in the future. And he's talking about sort of timeline events. And when you look at this blog, and you'll see his link also in the notes, and a lot of the stuff he does, you'll see his ability to visually represent with just colors, stick figures and lines, really complex information and reveal it slowly is super awesome. Now, I'm really aware this is taking a long time and you don't have all the time in the world. So I'm going to jump to a Medium post by a blogger called Thomas Puel, who's talking about the coronavirus and is presenting data in a really rich, fabulous way. And the thing I want to point out when you're reading his blog is check out, in the beginning he tells you really clearly what the conclusion is going to be at the end of this data and poses a question. And subsequently, if this is the conclusion and that is the question, our meaning-seeking mind is then engaged to look at all of his slides and to follow the bouncy ball. The metaphor I would want any academic or evidence-based expert to carry into their presentations, which are data-rich and slidey, is give your slides plenty of space. Each time you go into a slide, set up the axes and give lots of frames around what people should be looking for. Is it going here or is it going there? Would you expect this or would you expect that? And the use of a slow reveal and questions for engagement that pique the curiosity of the audience is going to help more people listen to the people we should be listening to. That's you, the people with the evidence, with the knowledge that could make a difference. I hope you enjoyed this edition of Observer Effect.